Hello and welcome to WIF's Laptop Cinema Club, the series that brings you intimate conversations with the media makers creating the films and shows you love. As part of our celebration of the women behind the 2021 Emmy contenders, we are so excited to bring you a conversation with director and producer Smriti Mundhra, the executive producer of Indian Matchmaking on Netflix. Indian Matchmaking has been nominated for an Outstanding Unstructured Reality Program in this year's Emmys race. And joining Smriti to talk about the show in which single millennials confer with an elite Indian matchmaker to find their perfect match is writer Sheila Yasmin Marikar, contributor to The New Yorker and The New York Times. Welcome.
Great to be here.
Smriti, congratulations. So many great things happening for you. And of course, the Emmy nomination that you received for Indian Matchmaking. How did you feel about that initial news?
It's so funny because I try not to think too much about awards and nominations because I don't want to jinx myself, and I also don't want to get my hopes up, frankly. So I didn't like keep track of when Emmy nominations were coming out. So I was at the grocery store, like getting breakfast for my daughter before dropping her to camp in the morning. And I just suddenly started seeing like text messages coming in saying congratulations, and that's how I learned the news. It was of course, I mean, unbelievably exciting. But I guess somewhat unexpected, although, obviously the amazing folks at Netflix had been, really making sure that there was awareness around our show. So it wasn't, I knew we were, submitted for the awards. I wasn't like surprised in that sense, but it's always, a thrill and a surprise to get nominated for such an award.
Of course. Talk to us about the process of developing the show, how you came up with the idea and how you first got to know Seema Auntie.
So I first got to know Seema Auntie because she was my matchmaker way back in the day. I was a client of hers. I would admit reluctant client of hers because I was, 27 and stubborn. But she just was somebody who was known in my community, a known matchmaker in my community. And I think my aunt had sent my biodata to her. I didn't even know I had biodata, but apparently one was created for me and sent to her. And when I first met her, my first thought was, I don't know if this woman's going to find me a husband, but I'm going to do something with her because she was so engaging and surprising and entertaining and a little bit infuriating. She's one of those people that you meet and she's so charismatic, you're immediately drawn to her, even as she's saying things that like will make your jaw drop. And I knew, at that point I was already sort of a producer and making, films and things like that. And I thought, this is definitely something, like I'm onto something here. I had sort of pitched the idea kind of loosely for Indian Matchmaking way back then, but it was a very different media landscape at the time, and there just wasn't a lot of space, for a dating show about brown people, frankly. So I didn't have much luck, but I did sort of luck into this scenario in which, in staying in touch with Seema, I learned that her daughter was coming back from graduate school and she was feeling all kinds of anxiety about her own daughter's, marriage prospects and things like that. And so I started making a documentary with my directing partner, Sarita Khurana. We started making a documentary about Seema's daughter and two other women in India who are going through that process of reconciling their own hopes and dreams with the pressure to get married and cultural expectations and things like that. And so for the 4 years that we filmed that documentary, which is called A Suitable Girl, I got to spend a lot of time with Seema and really learn her business from her perspective, not just as her client, but the ins and outs of how she deals with her other clients and the pressures and demands and the evolution of what matchmaking is, as it shifts from one generation to the next. And then when I had the opportunity to pitch the show again, to Bella Bajaria at Netflix, I seized on it, and thankfully she immediately recognized what I saw in Seema.
That's so cool, and such a storyteller perspective to initially meet her and think, maybe this isn't going to work for me, but it could make a really great production or inspire me in some way. Was there anything from that when you were actually one of her clients, any experience or anything that you went through with Seema that really stuck out in your mind as like, wow, this is something that more people need to know about? And I should build something around this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a couple things immediately come to mind. One is that Seema's brain is a computer. She will remember, she barely needs, she has sort of her spreadsheets and her, books of biodatas and things like that, but she almost never needs to reference them herself. She knows, I mean, she has hundreds of clients all over the world, and she's also constantly recruiting new clients. So she has this unbelievable capacity to remember who is related to whom, who has a son or daughter who's approaching marriageable age. That's actually how she found me. She sought me out because she remembered, she knew my aunt and she had heard of my parents, and she said, oh, this is about the time that this person might be looking for someone to marry, so let me get in touch. She's very proactive about her business. So that was really remarkable and fascinating to see. And also, like having gone through the process myself, I actually really realized that there is a lot about the process that's very, to my Western, 21st century sensibility can feel a little jarring. But in going through the process, I learned that there's actually a lot of value to it as well, and it's not that different, from dating apps and the ways in which we seek life partners, thinking we have all this autonomy, and independence, but actually we're self-selecting in the same way that a matchmaker might do for us. And the benefit of having a matchmaker is they can see things that you can't. And it's built around a different value system, to be sure, but there's a lot of value in it. And I actually did meet, a lot of really interesting people through Seema and through my matchmaking endeavors. People who, honestly, if I had met in a bar or, at university or something, I might have been interested in dating and continuing building a relationship. But in my sort of stubborn mind, I think because there was that sort of pretext of marriage, immediately it was a little stifling for me. So, but I saw the value in it. If you're looking to cut through the noise, if you're looking to sort of have very clear expectations about what you're looking for in a relationship, it can actually be really, really effective. And I think more and more now, people are, now that when I was working with Seema, there was barely, I think it was literally like a website. You would go on match.com and things like that. There weren't really like a lot of dating apps at that time. The proliferation of dating apps has come in the intervening years, since then.
Of course, it is kind of, we put ourselves in situations where, like you said, we think that we're the deciders when really we're, whether it's an app or friends or family or a matchmaker, there are other factors at play and the people that we're seeing and choosing to date. And you talked about how your American upbringing certainly influenced the way that you approached matchmaking when it came to yourself. How important was it for you in this show to show different types of Indian culture, like the kind of families in India versus the families in America versus some of the more conservative ones, some of the more liberal ones? Did you want to have a mix like that, or did it happen organically?
Absolutely. It was definitely a priority, and it just so happened that it sort of flourished that way organically. But it was definitely a priority. I mean, I think we're, 1.3, maybe more than that at this point, billion people, across the diaspora. And there are so many different experiences, so many different backgrounds, priorities, ideologies, identities within that. And, the world, Seema's world, the world of sort of elite matchmaking is inherently very narrow, within that big group. But and we had to be honest about that and organic to that. But within that, we wanted to show as much diversity as possible. It's always a challenge because when you're producing a show, you're dealing with many factors, including first and foremost, who is interested and willing to be on your show. And so for especially the first season, when it was, we were sort of breaking a new kind of format and structure for a dating show, tapping into a totally new set of participants. It was a challenge to find people who were willing to open up this part of their lives to us. So it was naturally a lot of filtering that way, just who was even open to being on the show. But within that pool, we really tried to show as much diversity as we could. So it was important to have, people who represented a perspective of feeling othered even within the community, like Nadia, who's, Guyanese Indian has always felt a little bit marginalized within the Indian diaspora. And so it was like, that was an interesting perspective. Rupam being, a divorced woman being sick, a woman, with a child, single mother, like that was an, perspective that, I really wanted to showcase. The conservative side, the more progressive side, the in-between, and including showing a lot of the stuff we've internalized, without judgment. Because we've all been there, we've all been raised how we've been raised, we've all internalized a lot of things. And I think it was important to really show where we are as a society so we can reflect on it, and maybe evolve beyond some of it.
Of course, it did ignite a lot of conversations, this series, about classism, about colorism, about many aspects of Indian culture. What was your take on some of the conversations that came out of this about the way that Indian society is structured and the kind of talking about a suitable girl, like the sort of characteristics that matchmakers and some families look for? How did you feel about the conversations online and in other media that came out after Indian matchmaking?
Honestly, I thought it was great. Everything that I strive to do as a creator and as a producer, a filmmaker, is to open up conversations so we can better learn about ourselves, we can deprogram ourselves, of long-held beliefs, we can reflect a little bit more in society, we can see ourselves reflected in society. That's the goal. So conversation is part of that. It's nothing to run away from or shy away from. I think with our show in particular, for all of the things that were said about the show, both positive and critical, I haven't heard many people say it's inaccurate. I think we the one thing, if I can say, is like, I think we did a good job of accurately reflecting a portion of the society and the values and the conflict and the dynamics, within that society. Are there ugly parts to that? Absolutely. And would it have been easy to erase those out of the show? Yeah, it would have definitely been possible. Or would that have felt authentic to the audience that the show was intended for? I don't think so. And if a broader audience, either an Indian diasporic audience or even a broader global audience, is learning and reflecting on things like colors and casteism, classism, patriarchy, sexism, all of those things, by watching, a frothy dating show, I think that's a win, and I was very actually encouraged by some of the thoughtful think pieces and, tweets and feedback that and conversation that the show, sort of gave rise to, because I think we should be talking about all these things. And as much as we try, like I come from a background of independent documentary, and independent film, and, that's a place where we very deliberately try to be provocative and really engage in these kind of difficult conversations. But the audience for those things is so much more limited, just by nature, than a big sort of mainstream dating show. So if we can bring some of that conversation, into a broader audience where people of different generations, parents and children and grandparents and aunts and uncles are debating these things, and they're amongst themselves and in their own WhatsApp groups and amongst each other, I think that's a huge win, culturally. And I was definitely sort of listening, engaging as much as I could with that conversation, because it's instructive to me, and it shows me where to push and how I can do better. And it also just, I think it's great that we're having these conversations as a culture.
I know in my family and friends' families, last summer, everyone was talking about it. Everyone had an opinion on one character or another, on Seema Auntie. It resonated and opened up so many conversations that, you're right, I think are very important to have, even if they do bring up some truths about our culture that are not so uncomfortable or maybe politically correct. But people from all sorts of backgrounds were having this reaction to Indian matchmaking. What do you think made it one of these universal series that just really captivated all sorts of people?
I think because the core of our show is watching people really seek, on their quest for belonging. And that's as universal as it gets, whether you're struggling with that, whether you're seeking that, whether you found that, and I say belonging rather than love, because, I think particularly with the sort of, Indian, South Asian matchmaking, tradition, this social construct, marriage is a means to belonging, right? Whether you agree with that or not, and whether that's problematic or not, it is deeply ingrained in us that that's a means towards belonging. You belong in a part of a family unit. Your family units come together, to create a larger, family structure. And I think that's what a lot of people seek actually through this search. And what they struggle with. And I feel like there's nothing more universal than that. We all deal with that, no matter what corner of the world you live in, no matter what kind of background you come from. And I think that's what people really related to in the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about belonging and finding love in the wedding industry in India, it's a topic that, of course, has been of interest to you for many years. What keeps you coming back to it?
Because it's so full of drama. There's like, it's both, I mean, like from a creator's perspective, there's so few things in life which are both beautiful to look at and like ripe with drama, and so revealing of where we are as a society, of the human condition, of an emotional journey. And weddings and marriage and the search for that, whether you're running away from that or towards that or grappling with it in some way, it gives you all those things, and I think it's sort of a no-brainer. It's like there's so much can be mined from that quest. There's like an external quest, but there's always, it brings up internal stuff, and it's sort of one of those inflection points in life where it forces you to reckon, and reflect. And so that's why I just keep going back to the well.
Yeah, of course. It's rife with material. There, like you said, there's always something that some sort of drama that's going to come out. How did you find such compelling characters for the show? Tell us more about the casting process. And like you said, you were really forging into a kind of new genre, especially in the Indian community. I'm really curious to know how you were able to perhaps convince some of these people to go on camera and let you follow them through a really emotional, sensitive process.
Yeah, it was tough. It was really, really challenging. So the first thing that we did was I called every single one of Seema's 500 plus clients and tried to, and especially in India, that required talking to many family members, like within, so it's not just like talking to the young person, it's like you have to talk to my parents, and then no, you have to explain to my wife, or no, talk to my uncle, no, you have to talk to my kid and see if they're interested. So it was like many phone calls, and just to see who from her clients, would be open to us even exploring this, and then there was like many other hurdles to clear in terms of if they, like what their time trajectory was, were they going to be compelling on TV, how open they were going to be, all of that. But that was the first step, was to call every single one of her clients. And then we put the word out, just through word of mouth, through friends, through family, through those clients. Every time, somebody said, no, I'm not, I mean, most of the time people said, no, I'm not interested. So he said, can you just, like forward this email to any friends you have? Maybe somebody who's interested. So there was a lot of sort of getting the word out, that we're trying to do this show. And, my background as a documentary filmmaker, I think was both helpful and potentially a little scary for people, because everybody that Seema knew, by the time A Suitable Girl came out, knew that we had filmed with her for 4 years. I mean, we were like furniture, around her at some point. Like every event she went to, and we were in her house all the time. So everybody sort of in her world, like knew who I was and knew that I was the person who was like following her around for 4 years. And so they were immediately like, are you asking to follow me around for 4 years? And I was like, no, this is not that, it's different. But also I think there was a lot of appreciation for A Suitable Girl, and the way that show really sort of portrayed our culture, with honesty and respect and things like that. So that was helpful, but yeah, it was a challenge to get to sort of talk people into, please expose, please allow us into this most vulnerable time in your life, where you're going to be at the peak of potentially the peak of conflict with your family, at your most vulnerable, personally, in terms of your confidence, in terms of your, whatever, all of that stuff. Let us into all of that. Like, that was a really tough sell. But I think the people that we found and the people who found us are people who had something like that they wanted to explore and wanted to share with others. So I think we really, I couldn't imagine a better cast, honestly, than the one we had, because everybody had sort of their own perspective and really brought so much, to this conversation.
Of course, and you talking about following Seema Auntie for 4 years, even before this show started, makes me wonder, what is Seema Auntie like off camera? Is she the exact same person? Is she? I know everyone is a little bit different, but you must know her better than almost anyone. So
Sheila, I promise you, she is exactly the same. Like, that's one of the amazing things about Seema, is that she's, from the day I met her, like before I made the documentary, from the time I was her client, she's consistent. She's always the same, no matter who she's around, no matter what crowd she's in, no matter what country she's in, whether a camera's on her or not. And to this day, like, she's basically a celebrity now, especially in India. She gets mobbed at airports, and, she's like got whatever, she's doing commercials for Burger King or whatever she's doing. She's become a celebrity, and she's still the same person, still the same person, which is like what's so wonderful about her, and why I think people really responded to her, because you could just sense that authenticity, you could just really sense that authenticity. And even now, like, since the show's come out, she does interviews and stuff like that, and we try to help her, like, with talking points, and she's like, I'm just going to say what I want to say. Like, she's like, I'm going to be, this is how I feel, and I'm going to say what I want to say. And I'm like, okay, that's your magic. You do you.
Right, you do you. That's so fantastic. I do love how she did not hesitate to throw a little dig at one of her clients when she felt like they were being a little bit unreasonable, or just too hard to work with, or their expectations were way out there. She really does keep it real. Yeah. What did you hope that viewers of the first season would come away with?
So I think there was sort of a different hope for different viewers. I think for Indian people and South Asian people, the hope was to see ourselves reflected in mainstream pop culture. Our story and our, journeys are both universal and very sort of specific. And I wanted people to really be able to see that, I wanted people to see, like, this is, exactly what I go through with my family, or this is how I feel when people say these kinds of things to me, or, I wanted people to see that in, like, a mainstream format, and not through a gaze that was like, this is, I'm presenting my culture or performing my culture for non-Indian people or non-South Asian people. I wanted it to feel like to have elements of feeling like a secret language, that we know and understand and feel intimately sort of in our bones. So that was my hope for Indian people in particular, to be able to see. And then for a global audience, and a non-Indian audience, I wanted them to see that our stories are just as universal as anybody else's. And I wanted them to really understand that yes, there are things about our culture that are a little shocking and a little jarring, and maybe require second thought and should eventually change. But there is, underlying all of that, sort of a deep love, on the part of families. Like, all of the parents, in our culture, most of the parents in our culture ultimately just want the best for their children, and they're doing the best they can, with what they know and things that they've internalized. And we're doing the best we can with what we've learned and we've internalized. And I wanted people to be able to really see that this isn't like a black and white, women or young people in Indian culture are, subject to this sort of draconian, outdated, torture, arranged marriage, or there's no choice, or there's no conversation or conflict around it. Like, it's actually a gray area, and I wanted people to be able to see all of that.
Of course, yeah. I really did appreciate how many men you profiled, and how many of their journeys were in many ways quite similar to the women who were seeking husbands. It's really, like you said, something quite universal that everyone is seeking. And what was your reaction to how the show was received globally? I know the week that it came out, it was in the top 10 in a number of countries. That must have been thrilling.
It was so thrilling. It was, I mean, you know, coming from an independent film, independent documentary background, you know, I'm used to having to beg people to watch the things that I make, you know, but this was one where, I mean, instantly, you know, I haven't gone anywhere really much, you know, because the show came out during the pandemic. And so I haven't been traveling quite as much as I usually do, but the little that I have started to sort of travel and, you know, go and socialize a bit more, the number of times people approach me and, you know, say that they watch the show, or I never watch shows like this, but I watched that one from start to finish, or, you know, like just literally yesterday, a friend of mine messaged me and said she was on a hike with a bunch of her friends and they were completely standing, you know, Indian matchmaking without even knowing that she had any connection to anyone on the show. And I mean, that's a huge thrill. And I get to live vicariously through Seema, you know, who like getting to see like, you know, the way people are reacting to her in India and the show in India. It's a huge thrill. It's like, it's, you know, how can, it's the thing, you know, as creators that we seek and strive for with everything that we make, and rarely ever happens. So, you know, to that have happened for this show, it's just an absolute thrill.
Fantastic. And more exciting news, Indian Matchmaking has been renewed for a second season. I, for one, am so excited. I cannot wait to binge the whole thing. What is your hope for this season? How are you going to approach it this time around?
You know, I think it's interesting because I think there's not, I don't feel compelled to change too much in terms of the sort of the way the show is made and the structure of the show, because new people bring new experiences, new perspectives. We as producers don't have to have such a heavy hand or think about how we're going to make this more interesting again. Every new person, you know, that is introduced in the show, you know, and their journey is going to make it feel like a new and different show. So I feel like my job, you know, as a producer is to just make sure we continue to push for more diverse voices and diverse people, backgrounds, storylines. Ultimately, it's like what people are watching the show for is not how clever we are with the format or what, you know, like challenges we present, or, you know, like the producing elements is not what people are watching the show for. It's the people and their journeys. So I think as long as we find, you know, continue to find great people who are authentic and real about and earnest about their search for a life partner, and allow us into that part of their lives for a period of time, I think, you know, there's not much more for us to do, honestly.
I'm sure that casting this time around is going to be a completely different story. I'm curious, do you have people just lining up to want to be part of it?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, we had a lot more response, you know, this time, and people approaching us wanting to be on the show, a lot more. It's a totally different scenario than season one. But, you know, it's a balance, because it's important, you know, for a second season of a show like this, you know, to be able to really filter out, you know, the people who are interested in just being on a show, you know, that has become a global hit. Because that's like one thing that all of us, you know, on the producing side are very clear about, is that there's no gimmicks, you know, to this show. It's just a show about people seeking belonging and looking for love. So, you know, our goal is ultimately just to continue to find the most interesting, earnest people who are on that journey, and then, you know, let them carry the storylines and carry the show from there. So yeah, there's definitely a lot more people who are expressed interest in being on the show. And, you know, the added layer to our job now is to make sure that the people we cast on the show are very earnest, you know, in their desire and their journey.
Fantastic. Well, I know that we'll all be on the edge of our seats waiting for that one to drop. So good luck in the filming and the casting and the whole production process.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to continue doing more. And I have to, before we log off, I have to give a special shout out. I mean, everyone, you know, I think at this point can probably recognize how much Netflix has like changed my life by taking a chance on this show. But Women in Film actually played a really instrumental role in my career. Women in Film was the only organization to give me a grant for making a suitable girl. And it came at a really critical time. It's really hard to make independent documentary, especially when you don't have a track record in that field. We were really struggling, and Women in Film came through, at a critical time with grant money and helped us make A Suitable Girl. So I think there's like a wonderful synergy here in terms of how much, Women in Film has had an impact on my career, because if there was no A Suitable Girl, I wouldn't have had all the other opportunities I've had in my career, and Women in Film played a huge role in making that film happen. So special shout out to Women in Film, all the amazing staff and mentors and people who are part of the organization.
It is a wonderful organization and so vital now, especially as we're, navigating this new era of filmmaking and working, and we need more productions by women like yourself who can really shine a light on communities that we don't see often enough. Well, thank you, Smriti, for taking the time to talk with us.
It was my pleasure. It was so good to reconnect with you. You were the first person to interview me after the show came out. So this is like a wonderful opportunity to reconnect. I can't believe it's been a whole year.
I know. What a year. Well, I'm so excited for everything that's to come for you. And I am sure that we will have an opportunity to connect again soon.